Good evening. My name is Jamie Boyce. Welcome to our Good Friday 7 Last Sayings service. Tonight, 7 Unitarian Universalists will reflect on the 7 last words of Jesus from their own theological frames, speak from their own experience and stories, and invite us all to bear witness to the violence of empire, the loss of love, friendship, and hope, and the tender and inevitable surrender to death. In doing this, we join with Christian communities throughout the world who pause on Good Friday to bear witness and wrestle with the significance of the suffering and death of Jesus in our lives today. I invite you to take good care of yourself tonight, to nurture your body, heart, and soul with care. Feel free to keep your camera off, to step away when you need to take a break, to sip tea wrapped in a comforting blanket, to take good care. As we welcome this time of reflection, we hold grief tenderly and with reverence. We welcome you to this community of care and love. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your life journey, you are welcome here. I light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith with these words. May this flame be the light of friendship and love. Tim Versteeg has graciously offered to provide technical support this evening, as well as offering a reflection. Tim, thank you for your help tonight. We really appreciate it, and I invite you to offer our land acknowledgement.
In a system plagued by injustice and greed, those who have often owed their blessings to those who have not, have less, or once were the holders of the resource. A just and equitable future depends on changing this dynamic, and we commit ourselves to righting the wrongs of the past, creating respectful relationships with our brothers and sisters of the land, and shaping a future of equal opportunity and possibility for all our neighbors.
We were hoping to have some music, Tim, to launch our time together, and maybe we had a Zoom mishap.
My apologies. I thought that was sharing. Just hang on.
Yeah, it's a...
Keep it all out.
Sharing now?
Keep it all out. So love, fill me, breathe me to pieces. Love, I pray that you break that the whole world falls in. If I'm made for love, make me strong enough. And when I need to hide, love, hold me in your grace until I feel safe. Then love, fill me, breathe me to pieces. Love, come fall into my heart, it's wide open. Doves fly out and doves come home, here to rest. In my heart is wide open, heart is wide open, my heart is wide open, heart is wide open, my heart is wide open, fill me, breathe me to peace. Heart is wide open, my heart, fill me, breathe me to peace. Heart is wide open, my heart is when I need to hide. Love, hold me in your grace. Heart is wide open, my heart is when I need to hide. Love, hold me in your grace. Fill me, breathe me to peace when I need to hide. Love, hold me in your grace. Heart is wide open, my heart is when I need to hide. Love, hold me in your grace. Heart is wide open, sweet love, I pray that you break my heart so wide open that the whole world falls in.
From the Gospel of St. Luke. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. How much easier for Jesus to have cried out in blame of the many who had been involved in causing his death, the priests, scribes, elders, the multitude who had clamored for it, and his disciples, Judas and Peter, who betrayed and denied him. In Leonard Cohen's song, Amen, which some see as Cohen's attempt to come to grips with the horror of the Holocaust, there is a line expressing Hebrew tradition, vengeance belongs to the Lord. So if Jesus on the cross had called to the Lord, asking for vengeance for the perpetrators, it would have been consistent with the teachings of the priests. But Jesus did not ask for that. Instead, he called out from the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus had spent his life among common people, healing and teaching them to look at life and power differently. In particular, to see and respond to the needs of the poor and oppressed. These teachings were threatening to the priests, elders, and scribes, and the multitudes who wanted to maintain traditional rules and power structures. In some cases, because they benefited from them, and in others, because they were used to the existing order, even if it didn't benefit them. They were threatened by Jesus' message about how we could create ways of living together in mutual respect, dignity, and love. In his final hours, after being betrayed, persecuted, mocked, and crucified, Jesus could still say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He had lived his life with a message of love, and even as he approached his death on the cross, he was still able to teach us and model a better way than retribution. As a personal reflection this week, I ask myself, can I, in matters large or small, do the personal work necessary to come to that place Jesus showed us of understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness? To realize that a lot of harm is caused when people's experience and awareness do not prepare them to act kindly or justly. They know not what they do. To understand how power is used and abused. To see clearly where harm and oppression exist around me, whether deliberate or not, and how I may perpetuate them. To avoid turning away, denial, or betrayal in the face of harm, including that which I cause. To increase understanding of and address the conditions that cause me and others to cause harm. When I cause harm, can I bend in the direction of atonement and recommit to the work of healing and anti-oppression? May my spiritual practice and our church support me and others in this quest and work.
The Roman governor Pontius Pilate, the Gospels suggest, gave the gathered crowd a choice to release one of the two political prisoners, Jesus or Barabbas, from the fate of crucifixion. It is suggested that this was a custom during the Passover, and Pilate fully expected them to choose Jesus. The two men in custody were parallels of a sort, both popular leaders of resistance movements against the Roman occupation. And the name Barabbas is a further indication of the intended connection, meaning son of the Father. And some sources make the connection closer still, claiming that his full name was Yeshua bar Barabbas, bar Abba, or Jesus, the son of the Father, The crowd chose to release Yeshua Barabbas, the armed insurrectionist, instead of the man known as Jesus Christ, a popular young rabbi who preached peace and love. The action of the Jewish crowd left Jesus to be nailed to the cross between two common thieves, not famed freedom fighters like Barabbas, but nameless common criminals. And perhaps these men were victims of the oppressive Roman system that left many displaced and led to lives of banditry to survive, but we aren't told. But like Jesus, they faced their deaths that day on Calvary. Ending his ministry with these men on either side was consistent with the way he had practiced it all along. A member of a persecuted race, Jesus surrounded himself with others suffering oppression, using stories and teachings to criticize and condemn the pursuit of power and riches on earth. Lepers, Samaritans, and sex workers were all embraced by his ministry, all worthy of God's kingdom on earth, all equal above and below heaven. Surprisingly, the Gospels, so adept at using specific details to create meaning, don't indicate which side of Jesus each of the thieves was positioned. There's no dexter or sinister associations apparent from the text. It is only through their words that we become privy to their different attitudes towards the man hanging between them. The first thief's words to Jesus mockingly challenge him to save himself and them if he is truly the Christ. But the other good thief, as he is often referred to by theologians, chastises the first, asserting that though they are deserving of their punishment, Jesus has done nothing amiss. Instead, he asks Jesus to remember him when he comes into his kingdom. Jesus responds with the unequivocal statement, "Verily, I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise." These words run counter to so much of what was to become Christianity, as it was co-opted first by the Romans and the rich and powerful in the centuries to come, and turned to their own purposes. Here, salvation is unconditional for the good thief. It will happen today, Christ tells him, not tomorrow, not after some interminable time in purgatory. You won't be barred because you're not one of the elect, the chosen, or the rich and powerful. Today, you will be with me in paradise. These are the words he directs in the moment to the man who is experiencing the same pain and suffering he is. The words are not filled with anger or regret. They are not focused inward on his own suffering or raging against the injustice of his presence among these men, which the good thief had just articulated. Instead, he reassures and comforts the man beside him with a promise of equality in the eyes of God. Echoes of these words have reverberated down through the history of Unitarian Universalism and still inform our principles today.
According to John 19, verses 26 and 7, Jesus' third statement was, "Woman, behold your son, for whom from now on you must have a motherly affection." And to his beloved disciple John, "Behold your mother, to whom you must pay a sonly duty." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. This statement is traditionally known as the word of relationship. As one scholar writes, in between painful breaths, he was still caring for those he loved. People who are facing death with sense of peace seem to be able to imagine others' suffering as well as their own. Though several of Jesus' last words reflected a very human response to his own pain, in these words, he attempts to alleviate the suffering of his mother and his dear disciple John, as he commands them to look away from his suffering and behold each other. With his thoughts on Mary's future security and protection, Jesus entrusted her into the care of John, his beloved disciple, the one disciple who had not abandoned him in his suffering. Most scholars believe Joseph, Mary's husband, was already dead by this time. Traditionally, the oldest son in a Jewish family was duty-bound to provide for his mother's care if she became a widow. Curiously, Jesus used the word woman and not mother, and he entrusts his mother not to James, Jude, or one of his other male siblings, but to his friend and disciple, John. The scholars are, of course, Christian, but what might this part of the story say to Unitarian Universalists who may be pagan or humanist, agnostic, or atheist? First, that in aspiring to live our second principle, even amid my own suffering, I can have compassion in my human relations, as Jesus demonstrated when he looked at his mother and saw her suffering. Second, as another scholar identified, Jesus' choice of the word woman and not mother reflected not only his compassion, but recognition of her inherent worth and dignity. In the Greek, the word woman was a highly respectful and affectionate mode of address. Another scholar proposed that using the word mother would have been just too painful for her. The story challenges me to live our covenant of right relations, to be mindful in my choice of words, especially when I'm suffering or not my best self. Like mothers, mothering is what we all can do when others are suffering. Third, what might Jesus' choice to commend his mother to his disciple John, rather than to one of his male siblings, say to us Unitarians about his notion of family? To quote, "But Jesus knew that none of his half-brothers were disciples yet. They had not accepted Christ's claims or committed to his mission, nor did any of them choose to be present at his suffering and crucifixion. Thus, Jesus chose John out of profound spiritual concern for his mother. The story puts his mother's spiritual and emotional needs before culture's demands, in a way, creating family of choice, even though Jesus chose that family for her. Simply put, the message of his third statement, "Woman, behold thy son," is even in the midst of my own suffering, I can find the strength to attend to the suffering of others.
Abide with me, fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens, still with me abide, when other helpers fail and comforts flee. Help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay. In all around I see, O thou who changes not, abide with me. We need each other every passing hour. Channels of grace and life affirming power, faithful companions, share this path with me. Through all our fears and hopes, abide with me.
My God, why hast thou forsaken me, abandoned me, deserted me, left me all alone? Many honest believing people have not, how many honest believing people have not had this feeling? Isn't God supposed to help us, abide with me, protect us, keep us from harm? Isn't that part of the faith contract? I will believe in you, worship you, even serve you, and you're supposed to be there for me. You're God the Father, so they say. A father has duties to take care of his children. In the Garden of Gethsemane, just hours before, Jesus also calls you Abba. That's a gender-neutral Aramaic word for parent, so I think of it as Mama Papa. He prays to you, Mama Papa, to take this poisoned cup away from him. He's a little boy, lost and alone. Parents aren't allowed to do this. And to think that Jesus was such a faithful child of the divine, called upon early in his life to be brave, to speak up for God, to prove to leaders that there's a new message, to teach the masses how to live under a new ethic, to speak truth to both religious and political power. And he did all of that, all that he was called upon to do. But then he's arrested and tortured, disgraced and condemned and strung up to die shamefully in public. Why? Why? Back in Gethsemane, Jesus accepted that it was Mama Papa's will that he should be sacrificed. But here, in this excruciating, suffocating moment, that acceptance dissolves. And he's left with the entirely human yearning to be held, soothed, rescued. We might imagine that this middle statement happened in the middle of the 3 hours in which the pain would be the greatest before the beginning unconsciousness begins to envelop him. So he's at his worst at this moment. And where are you, God? Now, no doubt you have felt forsaken, abandoned, and alone sometimes. I sure have. I have felt certain that God, as I understand God, is walking right with me along the path that was divinely approved of and blessed. Suddenly the ground crumbles and there's a sinkhole and I'm down in it and no one is even looking over the edge to search for me. This is how it feels sometimes. When Jesus says these words, He's turning to the long relationship that Jews have had with God, as he's quoting Psalm 22, verse 1, the exact words. He's echoing the repeated moments of despair, felt not only by the psalmist, but with all of Israel. He's joining himself with his traditional people and culture and faith. Historically, this saying appears first in the Gospel of Mark, which was the first one written. And the verse in Mark includes the Aramaic words. So Jesus spoke this in Aramaic, the contemporary everyday language at that time, not Latin, not Greek, not even Hebrew, Aramaic. So Jesus is also connecting himself to the everyday culture of his time. And in my mind, he connects himself with the people of the future, especially our time. Jesus is experiencing betrayal and revealing doubt in God. He's demonstrating that faith can have room for doubt and despair, which becomes increasingly important centuries and millennia after his death. We don't have to show unshakable faith at all times. Faith isn't perfection. We can stumble and lie flat on the ground for as long as it takes to pull ourselves up like the clumsy, aching oafs we seem to be at times. Now, the rest of this story claims that we are not truly abandoned, that life can renew itself. But at this moment, we are destroyed. And that should not be allowed. My God, why hast thou forsaken me?
According to the book of John, when Jesus felt death's shadow, he said, "I thirst." It's believed that the Gospel of John was not written by the apostle himself, but by members of the Christian community in Greece, where he ended his days. The text was from the end of the 1st century. It was not an eyewitness account. I don't know whether the Bible's 4 versions of the death of Christ are factual, but they are an accurate depiction of crucifixion in the Roman Empire. The Romans executed by crucifixion for over 500 years, stopping around the year 400, when Christianity became the official religion. The Romans didn't punish their own citizens this way. The combination of torture and execution was reserved for people who had no civil rights in the empire, for slaves or gladiators, disgraced soldiers and foreigners from their occupied countries and colonies, especially in the Middle East. It was most often a punishment for political crimes, social activism, dissent, or insurrection against the Roman state and its gods. The bodies were left on display after death as a lesson to those who dared to challenge the authorities. It's estimated that after the rebellion led by Spartacus around 73 BC, that over 6,000 people were crucified along the main road outside the gates of Rome. The Romans were efficient. There are only a few records of survivors. The only ray of light for those put through this gruesome process was the tradition of offering the crucified person a drink or a soaked sponge. Not water, but wine or vinegar mixed with bitter herbs such as gall or myrrh. These concoctions had different effects, Some were painkillers, others sedatives, and sometimes they were poison. The Gospels all record Jesus being offered this drink before or during his time on the cross. In 2 accounts, he refuses, but in Matthew and John, he accepts the gesture near to his death. I've always regarded this offer of bitter wine as yet another example of mocking cruelty by the Roman soldiers, but I'm not so sure now. Some historians describe groups of women who moved among the crucified with these drinks, offering what might be thought of as a form of palliative care to the doomed. Perhaps the women with Jesus that day had their own mixture with them. There are 43 references to thirst in the Bible. In these verses, people thirst for God, for righteousness, for eternal life, and sometimes for water. Many biblical scholars feel that when Jesus said, "I thirst," he was yearning to quench his spiritual pain in his time of human frailty and despair. I'm not a scholar, though, and I see this sad event from another perspective. As we've already heard, when Jesus said, "I thirst," he had finished attending to the needs of those he loved. His affairs were in order, and he had tried calling out to God to no avail. He was now alone, surely afraid, and in physical agony with his life ebbing away. It seems to me that in his final moments, just maybe, he reached out for a human connection. At the core of Christ's teachings was a call for love, mercy, and compassion. On one occasion, he told his followers how they could best serve him by saying in part, "When I was thirsty, you offered me drink." He often spoke about the need to show kindness to prisoners, which became his own fate. Perhaps saying, "I thirst," was one final attempt to experience the care of others. In doing so, it fell to a foot soldier, the lowliest agent of the Roman state, to show him that mercy, perhaps if only to move the process along, to stop the agony. The Sisters of Charity is the international missionary order founded by Mother Teresa. In every one of their chapels, there is a crucifix with the words, "I thirst," beside it. The story is that in 1946, Teresa was riding a train in India and experienced a mystical vision of Christ uttering, "I thirst," and asked her to care for the poorest, the least of these. That became the mission of the organization. Noam Chomsky observed that during the first 3 centuries of Christianity, it was a radical, pacifist religion, which is why it was persecuted. It was a religion of the poor and suffering. Jesus was a symbol of the poor and suffering, and that is what the cross was, he said. The first century Christians in Greece understood this. There is a great thirst for compassion and kindness in our community and the bigger world around us. May we all answer the call to quench it.
The ancient Greek version of the gospel description of the crucifixion records Jesus as saying tetelestai as he is about to die. This Greek accounting term for paid in full has been translated to English as "it is finished." A Jewish reader of the Greek Gospels would have recognized some details of the crucifixion, such as the placing of a sponge of wine on a branch of hyssop in Jesus' mouth, as Jesus completing the sacred rituals of the Passover. As his death comes near, Jesus uses the word tetelestai to assert that the Passover requirements have been completed, fulfilling his covenant with God. Later Christian readers understood tetelestai as Jesus' statement that the Old Testament prophecies of a Messiah sent by God to reconcile the people with their God were fulfilled and finished in the life, ministry, and death of God's Son Jesus. In this understanding, the debt owed by humankind to God for the original sin of Adam was finally and forever paid in full through Jesus' death on the cross. Henceforth, all people could share everlasting life with God and Jesus in the kingdom of heaven. This notion of universal salvation reflects the founding theological principle of Universalists. Good Friday offers us an opportunity to reflect upon our understanding of the meaning of life and death, and to remember those whose deaths have had an impact on our lives. I'd like to share a story that had a major role in shaping my views of life and death. When I was 17, my mother told me one Sunday that her mother, my grandma, was very ill and had asked to see me before she went to the hospital on Monday. When we got to Grandma's house, she asked me to come with her to the living room. She smiled at me and in a very caring way thanked me for coming. Then she said very directly that she was dying and that she wanted me not to feel sad about that. She told me that 30 years earlier, she had been told by her doctors that she was soon going to die of cancer. I knew the history well. It was the Great Depression. She was the mother of 5 young children in a house with neither plumbing nor electricity, struggling to survive on a monthly shipment of sacks of cornmeal from Depression relief, plus whatever could be eked out on their 3-acre plot of land on Stonechurch Road. The doctors offered her an experimental Canadian treatment involving surgically implanting a needle of radium into her abdominal cancer in the hope that the radiation would kill the cancer. She decided to try it. Grandma told me that experiment had given her 30 years of extra life, which had given her the joy of knowing me and watching me grow. She said that should make us both very grateful, even happy, rather than sad. That was the last time I saw her, and it changed my life. That was Grandma's tetelestai, it is finished. And she helped me understand how a life can be paid in full.
Luke 23:46. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. I've been holding these words like a fistful of marbles all week, eager to release them gently into a bowl before they slip between my fingers and fall to the floor, scattering in a flash. Noticing this awkward holding on and my own fears of letting go and surrendering to the unpredictable suddenly feels exactly right for encountering these final words of Jesus as he surrenders to death and gives his spirit to God. Holding these words is complicated, stressful, it's scary, and it's full of possibility. As a Unitarian Universalist, I embrace the struggle that I have with this story and with these final words in particular. Indeed, Luke is the only gospel to document these final words. Father, unto your hands I commend my spirit, We know that the Lucan author was not an eyewitness to the crucifixion, but rather writing in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era with a purpose, it seems, of centering the ministry of Jesus that was lived at the margins of society, his ministry of justice and speaking truth to power. The Lucan author tells us in the beginning of the text with an introduction about his call. I too decided, he writes, after investigating everything carefully from the very first, to write an orderly account for you so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. This last line, spoken by Jesus, appears to be an addition to the story, and we might ask, why did the Lucan author need to expand upon the deep cry of expiration found in the other Gospels? As it invokes Psalm 31, as the tiny footnote reminds the reader, how is this cross reference to be understood? What does Psalm 31 lead us as we get curious about the final breath of Jesus? Psalm 31 is a lament attributed to David, a lament that discovers David in the midst of an existential crisis. Be merciful to me, David cries, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish, my years by groaning, my strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. The invocation of the psalm feels like an invitation into an encounter with the soul of suffering Jesus, to notice by lyrical reference his pain, to witness an inner world of grief and sorrow that is more complicated than the simple surrendering of one's breath over to God, which really isn't simple at all. It's also a reminder that the weaving of an emerging Christian tradition was actively engaging its Jewishness. And honestly, the Lucan author is struggling with it, negotiating the painful and problematic links that mark and break the Jewish-Christian connection, one that leads to centuries of anti-Semitic interpretations that want to simplify and rescue Jesus from his Jewish identity. It's not lost on me that tonight we reflect on Good Friday in the midst of the Passover Seder. And it's a good moment to name that we must resist the simplification of Jesus's identity and the social complexity of the historical context in which the story is born. It's important to struggle with the complexity. Scholar Amy Jill Levine invites the reader to attend to the tension between the identities of the text and how those identities shape an emergent religious and political imagination. My grip tightens around this complexity, and I notice that I'm feeling breathless in my own struggle to make sense of this final line, a line that feels like a pacifying ending to a murderous state death. Today, watching a video of the murder of a Black man in Grand Rapids, Michigan, my theopolitical imagination can't hold this romantic end to a life of Jesus. I am hearing a struggle until the end. Until the end, while Jesus commits his breath, his pneuma, his life to God, we might wonder about the God that shows up to that suffering. That final moment, that God that is present for the whole story, the God that is a refuge, a God that walks with their people in distress, a God that carves the path to liberation. That last breath on the cross, a death at the hands of a vicious and violent state, is not the last. Indeed, we continue to bear witness to state death and neglect. I hear the voice of the Grand Rapids police officer shouting, "Stop resisting," at Patrick Lyoya moments before he was murdered. Jesus' last breath is an invitation to the world. People of the earth must not stop resisting violence and oppression. My hands open. A kaleidoscope of marbles fall to the ground, shattering my inner silence. As the sound opens me, I hold the 6 million breaths around the world lost in the last 2 years to the COVID-19 pandemic. With an achy and open heart, I'm left with my own last words. God, I give you this living breath as witness to the injustice of the world and commit to freedom for people and the earth. May it be so. I invite us to drop into a few minutes of collective silence. Thank you for joining us this evening, for sharing in this time of reflection. Please join me in recognizing the courage and vulnerability of our speakers tonight. Mary Ellen Scanlon, Mary Scott, Gail Rapole, Al Sharp, Stephen Atkinson, and Tim Versteeg. Thank you. And as we take leave with a final piece of music, know that we will keep this space open for a few additional moments for those who wish to stay and connect for a time of sharing.
Hello, UU family. I'm going to sing a song with you called Shine on Me. It's an amazing spiritual that anybody can sing. And in these days when the things that we're dealing with, the feeling separate and all of that, and things seem so hard, this is one of those songs that you just throw your head back, put it in your medicine kit. All you have to do is ask. And here's how it goes. Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me, yes shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up. Oh, hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please hold me close. Oh, shine on me, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Oh, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on
We extinguish this chalice, but not the fire in our hearts until we meet again.